So this is Proverbs, book of Proverbs 25 and 16. It says, hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit. Right? So basically, this word is compared onto honey as well. Basically, you gotta eat as much as sufficient, right? If you eat too much, you're basically gonna vomit it, right? So, right. So, key prophecy is the mark, right? But let me ask you one. This made me think about other things as well. So before I get to the mark, let me talk about the mark of exemption, right? Which is basically that wisdom and knowledge, which is our stability. So it's the book of Ezekiel. It's the book of Ezekiel 9 and 4, and it reads Ezekiel 9 and 4. Ezekiel 9 and 4, and it reads, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Alright? So basically there's two marks, alright? There's a mark of exemption and there's a mark of basic destruction. Alright? So basically by taking what as I'm gonna get into, the mark of the beast, you're basically marking yourself for destruction. But taking this knowledge, alright, which is the ability of thy times, you're basically marking yourself for exemption. So let me read it again. This is Ezekiel 9 and 4. It says, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city. Right? So this actually happened back during the time of Ezekiel, where angels going through the midst of the city and doing this. But this also represents of the time that we're in now, right? Because you've had angels go out through the midst of the city and basically establish a mark on the heads of the people. All you have to do is go into books like Song of Solomon, right? Where it basically spoke of men going through the city desiring to find their love, right? And they found the watchman of the city. And it basically, there's various scriptures that speak upon it. Isaiah 30 and 20, alright? That's how the mark is set on the foreheads of the people that are the elect of the nation of Israel, alright? The 12 tribes, so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And I might as well do a roll call. Judah being the so-called Negroes, alright? Benjamin being the so-called West Indians, Levi being the so-called Haitians, okay? Ephraim being the so-called Puerto Ricans. Then you have Manasseh being the so-called Cubans. Then you have Simeon being the so-called Dominican Dominican Republic. And then you have Gad being the Native American Indians. You have Reuben being the so-called Seminole Indians. Then you have Central America being Zebulon. Then down there, then you have so on and so forth. Okay, Argentina and them places being what's this tribe of Naphtali, Asher, Brazil, Peru, all them places. Those are all the tribes in accordance with the prophecy in the Bible. But guess what? There's been a scattering upon the whole earth where you got all the tribes all over the earth, basically. Right? So anyways, Ezekiel 9 and 4. It says, and the Lord Yahweh said unto him, go through the midst of the city. Right? So that city that's being spoken of is the city of Jerusalem. Right? Because Jerusalem is a people before it's a place. Okay? It was established as a people before it's a place. A city of peace. Yerushalayim. Right? And set a mark. Alright? So when you go into that word mark, what you find there in the Hebrew is for what? Which means a mark of exemption. right? For Wa, when you go into the Hebrew alphabet, you have the last mark, last letter of the alphabet being Fa, right? Which is basically like a cross, right? Which means end. Okay, that's because all the characters in the Hebrew have a meaning, a word, all right, a reason for the way they're written, all right, and they have a word to go with it as to why they sound the way they sound. So far representing the end or sign or cross, right, goes into the word for wa, right? But then for wa basically means mark of exemption, right? A sign to basically say don't go past that person, all right? But then also could be a sign for you to say to go on to that person the same way, right? As I'm gonna get into. But so this is Ezekiel 9 and 4. It says, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry. Right? And all sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. Right? So you have basically men sighing and crying, and that's the way you understand who's gonna have that mark of exemption. Right? Because they're gonna be men that sighing and crying for all the abominable things that be done in the midst of their people, basically. Hey, like I've only heavily really understood. I did a video on this years ago, Chirac, right? And it was literally down to the fact that I kept hearing about Chirac. So I was wondering, okay, why Chicago has always had that kind of that stain of basically criminal underbelly, dealing with dealing with the mafia and all these different things. I said, let me look into this word Chicago. And when you look into it, it basically means it's a Gadite word. You know, the broken Hebrew they speak over there in America, right? Which basically means I can't remember how they pronounce it, but Chicago basically means it might even be a Sioux word, but it basically means place of the foul stench or place of the rotten onion, right? And that's why that spirit of death is over there, right? So that's one of the great abominations that be done in the midst of Jerusalem, right? You had these drillers going crazy. I've only really understood, because obviously you got the UK drill movement, but they basically took from the Chicago movement and basically put an English spin on it, right? Basically mixing it with the Chi-Town drill and the UK grime and UK hip road rap, and basically making their own thing, all right? But those are the abominations that we cry and we sigh and cry that's been done in the midst of it. Also things like homosexuality, all right? Theft, unrighteousness, all those forms are the things that we're sighing and crying for the abominations that be done in the midst thereof, all right? So it says, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for the abominations that be done in the midst thereof, right? So those men that get that mark of exemption, the Fawah, they're basically sighing and crying for the abominations that be done in the midst thereof, right? So that by them sighing and crying, that's basically gonna spur them on into seeking that mark, right? Because ultimately as well, what plays into that is the fact that we're under these curses in the book of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, right? By being under those curses, usually that spurs you to think like, yo, why are we suffering the way we're suffering, all right? And then you understand that it's a sign on us to let us know that we're the chosen people, and then understanding that, showing humility and wanting to understand that, basically will put you in tune with the search of the Heavenly Father and His Son, all right? So I want to go a bit more in depth into that now. This is Revelation 14 and 1. And it reads, it says, and I looked, and lo, the Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, right? Mount Zion also is another nickname for the children of Israel, all right? The word Zion, actually, let me grab this precept quickly. Yeah, this is Psalms be able to find this precept, man. Ah. Alright, escaping right now.